coming from the great American Southwest, from the very low desert. Good morning, good evening, whatever the case may be to all my listeners around the world. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares from the Sabbath at Midnight, here to bring you another exciting episode. Today's guest, he goes by the name Jeff Brennan, and we're going to be speaking a little bit about everything tonight. It's going to be always through a biblical lens. We're going to be talking about the Nephilim, demonic spirits, the Holy Ghost, Jesus, the Bible, cryptids. We're going to be talking about many things, the state of the world, and on and on. But before we get into that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to us on YouTube. That's going to keep the lights on and help the show grow and reach a wider audience. So please, subscribe if you haven't. If you have, thank you. Let's keep moving. Also, if you want to help the show grow even more, please, we accept donations through the bio in all the episodes. And also, if you want to become a member through Buzzsprout, it's only $7 a month, and you get access to some members-only episodes. So, with that being said, let's get on to the next segment. Also, just a reminder, I think it is about a month away now. We are in mid-July, and we have SpiracyCon coming up. It is going to be taking place in Kentucky. I will leave more details in the description, but it is SpiracyCon, and it is obviously about conspiracies, cryptids, all that cool stuff. We're going to be attending to that event, but I'm going to be going with a different plan. I'm going to bring the gospel and bring the Lord Jesus Christ to this audience, and whether you want to accept us or not, that is up to them. But for a fact, I'm going to be speaking there. I'm going to be a guest speaker, and I will be letting the audience know my opinion on these cryptids, where they come from, to be careful, and, just always have discernment and always look at everything through a biblical lens. See what God says first. Rebuke now, ask questions later, as I always say. So with that being said, let's get into this episode. As I always say, kick up your feet, grab yourself a coffee, hit the head if you need to, hit the bathroom. But if not, let's get ready. Start sipping that coffee, and let's sit our butts down on the chair, turn the volume up, and let's get into it. Back to Sabbath at Midnight. I'm your host, Lionel Tavares, here for another exciting episode. And tonight's guest we have right here, Jeff, but I'm not going to, ruin it for you guys. I'm going to let him go ahead and introduce himself. So, sir, please go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where to find all your content and all that good stuff.
All right. Hey, thanks you guys for both having me on. I've been enjoying kind of going back and forth with Dominic, so it's been great. My name's Jeff Brennan. I'm pastor, teacher, author over at thewayremnant.com. You can find us on YouTube, The Way Remnant. You can find all my books and stuff on thewayremnant.com/books. Makes it real easy. Yeah, guys, listen, I came to Christ about 36 years ago. Been in ministry all that time and done lots of things, seen lots of things, and had some shifts on my views on some things, in 36 years. Tonight we're going to be talking about my new book, Before Adam, the Fall of Enlil. And that was a definite shift in some of the stuff that I'd been taught growing up in the church. So yeah, I'm excited about being on tonight, guys. Thank you.
Yes, it sounds very, very, very exciting and very interesting as always. So Dominic, go ahead and start the show off. You guys have been talking more back and forth. I wasn't able to get in that conversation, I guess. So
go ahead. Sure. You want to be see, I was going to call you pastor, but is Jeff?
Jeff. No, let's not use titles. Yeah. Titles
Okay.
and $5 might get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So yeah, we're good. No
Five
titles.
$5? Probably not. Not in
Probably.
California.
Here we go.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to get into what made you want to write this pre-Adamic time of Adam. And
So, yeah, I started off back about in 2014. I took the red pill, done a deep dive into the Nephilim, and that's where I came out with my first book, The Nephilim: A Giant Walk Through History. And I wanted to write a prequel. That book starts like it's a teaching, but it's also in story format, like I did with the Before Adam book. And so that book starts in the days of Jared, right? It goes all the way from the days of Jared all the way through past where we are today. So that's why it's like, it's a chunk, right? And I always wanted to write a prequel because we had a lot of people saying, well, what happened before that? What happened with, when did the angels, when were they created? What happened with all this? And I had started getting into looking at some of the different views on creation. And some of the things just didn't add up. When you look at the Sumerian King's tablet, you look at some of these artifacts that we find. They're like, man, they go way past 6,000 years, which we're kind of where we think Adam was. They go way past 10. Now we've got Gobekli Tepe, right? And it goes 11, 12,000 years. Like, how can we look at that from a biblical worldview? How can we look at that in the biblical narrative? And find something that matches up. And I remember going back years ago, somebody gave me a Dake's reference Bible way back in the day, heavy dispensationalism. I'm not there anymore. I'm not a dispensational guy, but it did open up some ideas to me that I'd never heard with kind of there's that gap between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. And that is where I started wanting to write this book because it's not talked about a lot. There's some really good scholarship on it. There's some good linguistic and Hebrew concepts that are going on in between verse 1 and 2. And if we can get into all that, if you guys want, I'm happy to do that. But that's where I really wanted to get into because we see these little glimpses in the Tanakh. We see these little glimpses of this being that God created in perfect wisdom and perfect beauty and all this stuff, and then he falls. How did that happen? What did it look like? What was the aftermath of it? That's the reason for coming out with this book, Before Adam, the Fall of Enlil. That's where I wanted to come at, and I wrote it in a story. I like writing these things in a story format because sometimes, guys, when we talk, and we use our big Cadillac words and hermeneutics and all these different things like this, it can bore the reader a little bit, and I try to make it a little bit more exciting in a narrative format.
awesome. So let's get started with your book. Are we going to Genesis 1:1? Are we going into that age?
Yeah. So Genesis 1:1 starts off, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and it's Hashemayim right there. It's heavens, not heaven. King Jimmy gets that wrong. But and then in verse 2 it says, and the earth was without form and void. And what we get into, there's a vav disjunctive there in that. I don't want to get too deep into the Hebrew, but that word really is better translated that the earth became, but it became void. It became, so something went on. So Genesis doesn't really, Genesis 1:2 doesn't start with the creation. It starts with the aftermath of something that went terribly wrong. So we see Genesis 1:1, God created everything perfect. It's in perfect harmony and everything's great. And then 1:2, we see, man, something's gone on and it's chaos. There's darkness in spots. There's destruction going on. We see bits and pieces of this in Jeremiah. We see things that have gone on and we're like, wow, what happened? And when you start looking at the word as a whole, in Genesis 1:2, the word where it talks about that the earth was void, right? It was void, and this is where you get into the word tohu vabohu, right? And then Isaiah talks about that the world was not made in tohu, right? Tohu vabohu, but then okay. So what happened? And so we start seeing that some of these things that went on, there was some kind of an event that went on, and judgment happened. If we look carefully at Job, we know that the angels were created sometime in between the earth being created and or the heavens being created and the earth was created. Because we know that in Job it talks about that the angels, the sons of God, were there at the foundation, the creation of the earth, right? So we know. So Genesis 1:1 should read, in the beginning, God created the heavens, and then he created the angels, and then he created the earth. But it doesn't read like that unless you read through all the text. Does that kind of make sense? And so that's one of the places that we first start off in the first chapter, is that we see God creating this character, this main character, and he's opening his eyes for the very first time, and he's in the heavens, right? There's no earth created yet, and he's just right there before God. And I take that story and I go through all the way when him being created in perfect wisdom and perfect beauty, God creating the rest of the angels, he's creating earth, and things are going on, and we talk about these things, and we begin to see his fall. You know, there's the 5 I wills that happened in the book of Isaiah, talking about, another thing I want to bring out, I don't call him Lucifer in the book. That's what we've all kind of been brought up to think of Satan, the devil. His name is Lucifer. You know, that comes from Jerome. That comes from a very bad translation in the Latin Vulgate. It's horrible. He takes Hillel ben Shachar and he makes it into Lucifer, right? And it, kind of after a star, which, guys, listen, Dr. Douglas Hamp, I don't know if you guys have ever had him on, but Dr. Douglas Hamp did some great scholarly research, linguistic research, going back with Akkadian and Sumerian and looking at the phonetical use of all these words. And he's actually come across, he's not the first one to come across, but he's another scholar that really pushes this idea that actually the name Hillel ben Shachar, Hillel, is actually a phonetical name based off the Sumerian Enlil. And so really when we're reading about Lucifer, when we're reading about Hasatan, the Satan, the devil, the old dragon, it's really talking about this entity that was Enlil. So that's why I picked the name of that. Instead of using Lucifer, I was trying to be a little bit more accurate with that. And so we take the story of Enlil. When God first creates him, he's in perfect wisdom, perfect beauty. He's got these unique like musical type of instruments and things built into him. He's the covering cherubim, right? Over the rest of the angels. What does that mean? So we kind of explore all of that instead of just telling it, instead of just doing a teaching on it. We kind of explore that. So the reader gets to go through and look at that and see kind of, when I first got into church, man, one of the things I really enjoyed doing was when I would hear the pastor talk about David and Goliath or Joshua and you're going into the promised land and doing things. I always enjoyed trying to picture, like in my head, like a movie. I wanted to see it. I wanted to, that's kind of the generation that we are nowadays. We want to see this stuff, right? And so that's one of the reasons that I do these types of books. I have other books where we do, just a straight teaching and stuff like that. And we do a lot of that on our program. But I really wanted the reader to get involved and be able to see kind of what was going on during this part of creation.
Absolutely. When I look at what you're speaking of right now,
yeah,
I see. I'm trying to put my words together here. How I'm going to say this. God did create this earth to be inhabited. And that's I think that's Isaiah 45:18.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So then we know from 2 Peter 3 that I'm sure you know this, but I'll read it for the listeners. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. So when I read that, for me, it's talking about this time when the world became bohu tohu, right?
Right.
And for me, it's as if, because you brought the Sumerians earlier, this was a time when possibly, this is just conjecture,
Sure.
but there was a flesh and bone race on this earth, and they were probably the angels that, because when they leave the first estate, they become physical. So something might have happened on that earth. And when you read that the Spirit of God was hovering above the darkness, the deep, that means evil. So something happened.
When you look at that in the Hebrew and the Greek, if you're looking at the Septuagint, where it talks about the deep right there, Tanhim, and then also is the abuso in the Greek, and that is literally the abyss. Don't we read somewhere in Revelation that something comes out of that same term, the abyss, right? In the end times, right? We see these demon beings and things coming up out. So this was a place of a prison, if you will. So what happened between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 to create this big cataclysm? We read, like in Jeremiah 4:23 through 26, that there's the mountains trembled, there were ruined cities. There was no man, the birds had fled, and all this stuff had gone on. What was that? What went on there? And so we try to get into that. Now, in the book that I penned was I put another humanoid race there as well. And some of this is speculation, brother. But I put another humanoid race that was not mankind as we know them today, not created in the image and likeness of God. And I kind of go into that and talk about that a little bit in the book. But I call them the Adim, and that's a Hebrew word meaning witnesses. So, and I use that, towards the end of the book as a way with some stuff tied in the New Testament. I'm not super dogmatic on that. That was just some literary stuff I was using. But the key thing is what went on this earth that we have, because we see it was created, like you brought out in Isaiah 45. It's created in perfection. It was created to be inhabited. It didn't all of a sudden become void and empty, right? So something happened, and so we go through all that. We talk about this great war. We slowly see a decay coming on. Enlil, we see some corruption going on with the 5 eye wills, and it doesn't happen over time. And it does happen over time. It doesn't happen just instantly. And I think that was another point I really wanted to bring out, is that, his fall wasn't just something he just woke up one day and said, well, I'm going to rebel against God. It was slow over time. We see some scriptures talking about because of the multitude of thy trafficking, right? Well, what does that mean? If you really dig down into the etymology between those words in the Hebrew, it's talking about slander. So it was also talking about trafficking souls. And so we get into, not only do we get into some slander, definitely slander issues, but we also get into some ideas that they were beginning to traffic in some of these shattered soul type of things. You guys have I'm sure you've heard about some of the abuses that happen today with kids and women and things like that go on. And it's all about shattering the soul. Well, this is not a new idea. And I think this is something that the enemy, Enlil, was doing even back then, trying to suck out some kind of power to work off of. And we explore that in the book. The term that we see today, the guy's name escapes me, but is Loosh. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Loosh. But I give a quote of that in the book of where that came from as far as whoever coined the term. But we explore all of these ideas about how the enemy learns to start using these horrible events that happen to people and uses them for his demonic power, or devilish power, if you will. And so all of these things kind of go together, go through the book and go through and paints a picture for everybody so they can kind of get a better idea of what's going on in the past, so we can make better decisions about what's going on in the future.
Dominic.
Oops, my mic was off.
I was trying to help you.
When now I know there's a lot of people out there that when they read that when the Bible says that I saw Satan fall like lightning from the sky.
Yeah.
Okay, for me, that has a dual prophetic meaning that he was thrown from the mountain of God.
Yeah.
And that might have been, I don't think it was that first world age. I think it's probably after, because he was he was also in the room with God when he was talking about Job.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that he was still, going up there, but it doesn't mean that he was no longer welcome there. But he was able to go there and still, discuss things with God, according to Job. And then we look, and then a lot of people have this misconception that when Satan we saw Satan fall like lightning, that he's under the dirt, he's in the underworld, under the earth, whatever, right?
No,
But
he just fell.
Yeah. But when we think about that, he's not living in heaven anymore. He's not in the Mount of God. But when we read in Revelation and Daniel, it says that the dragon, the serpent, he wipes out, I think it's so many starry hosts from the heavens, and he tramples on them. That's the war. That's a war in heaven. That happens in Revelation. So we know he's gonna knock down the starry host. And this is the time when Michael stands. And that's a time when Satan gets thrown from the heavens, second heavens. Now he's on the earth. So
I agree with that. I think that's where we see him having full access to the third heavens in the beginning, and then he gets cast down. I believe, and I agree with what you're saying, Tom. He gets cast down to the second heavens, and in the end, he's going to be cast down to the earth. And lo, he knows his time is short, and he's cast down to the earth. Guys, can you imagine what's going to happen when he's actually on the earth going nuts?
It's going to be wild.
Yeah, he's on the earth, and people need to understand that. I think it's Matthew 12. It says something like, if Satan casts out Satan, how can his kingdom stand?
Right.
That's Jesus talking.
Yep.
And so we know he has a kingdom. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that he's not just wandering around looking for whatever. Right. He has a demonic kingdom. And what that is, I don't know. I don't want to know about it. I don't want to care about it. But I'm just telling people that he has a kingdom.
We've been taught so many wrong things, Dom. I mean, I remember growing up back in the 80s and watching Gary Coleman, in one of his made-for-TV movies, he died and became an angel, or something like that. And I'm like, man, that we've been taught so many bad things. We're taught that Satan is ruling in hell right now with a pitchfork and all that. No, guys, he is in the second heavens, and he is orchestrating his armies. He is working and using from my opinion, the spirits of the dead Nephilim, using them to torment mankind and lead us astray and do all kinds of things. That's in my book with the Nephilim, A Giant Walk Through History. But I think on similar lines, we've been taught so many bad things and so many wrong things about the creation. And if we think that creation just happened 6,000 years ago, but we have all of this evidence, even if you're not a big fan of carbon dating and all this kind of stuff, we still have a lot of evidence pointing to a lot more history than we can account for. And this what I'm talking about, this period of time between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2 accounts for that. It does not, and I do want to say this because I get a lot of flack on this sometimes. It is a non-evolutionary version of these things. So I don't believe in evolution. I don't think that this theory promotes evolution at all. And there's a lot of good scholarship behind this. I know that Thomas Chalmers, George Pember, Charles Larkin, Donald Barnhouse, the late Chuck Missler, and even Dr. Michael Lake. All of these guys hold to this version of creation. And so when you see Genesis 1:1, it's God creating everything perfect. That's why he creates things. He doesn't create it like, a lot of the video games, when they put out a video game today, it's like half finished and they want you to buy all the updates afterwards. Oh, yeah. That's the version that most people believe, that God created the heavens and the earth. They think, oh, well, God put it out and he'll patch it in verse 3 through 26, right? No, he made it perfect. And then something happened. And then so verse 3 through 26, 27 is the recreation or him fixing the restitution of these things. And so I do believe that those things happened in a literal 6 days. So I want to make sure everybody understands that is, the rest of Genesis did happen a little, from my opinion, in a literal 6 days. But there is a gap of time there that we don't see a lot written about before Adam, and I think it really sets it up. If you believe that Lucifer or Enlil fell in the Garden of Eden, man, things must have really happened really fast. God created everything, the heavens and the earth, and then he created the angels, and then as soon as he creates this perfect being, right after he creates Adam, he falls. This perfect, I mean, like within not even a day. To me, that doesn't make sense. So something happened, something went on, and like I say, I think Dom, I know you got to read some of the book. I hope it was a good journey for you, and you're able to kind of see the progression. And I think that's an important part too, is that it's a progression. What happened with Cain? Sin was lying in wait. It was crouching, waiting to overtake him. Same thing I believe happened with Enlil, is that these ideas were birthed. These ideas began to take just the same things that happens with us, guys. We don't wake up and suddenly to say, hey, I think I'm going to go cheat on my wife. No, those thoughts kind of start off, and then you entertain them, right? And then you build on them, and then slowly, and then sure enough, bam, you make an action with it. I believe the same thing happened with every bit of creation, and so I think we'd have some good visuals going throughout the book.
Yeah, the Sumerians say that the first time in the first world age that their kingdom descended from the heavens.
Yeah,
and that's a time when it was the 7 sages plus Satan.
Yeah.
And then when that world flood hit, when it was Noah's flood now, that kingship came, it went back up and came back down again. And when you get into this Enlil, you start getting into the 7 sages, if you want to call them the Rishi out of India, or if you want to call them the Viracochas of Mexico, the Quetzalcoatl's, these are all the same entities, these 7 same entities.
Yeah.
Yeah, plus Satan.
My thing with this is, and I believe this is why God had Moses to sit down and take some dictation to write down Genesis. I believe that these fallen watchers, we have to remember where all of this information from the Sumerians, from the Hindus, from all these places. I believe, and I maintain today, I believe that they are telling a history, but it's told through the lens of the fallen watchers. They are telling a corrupted version of this, and I think that's why God said, "Okay, look, we're going to set the record straight here with Moses," and so that's why I believe that Moses wrote such detailed information going through Genesis all the way through, and we can get bits of pieces through First Enoch, through some some of the apocryphal books. I don't know necessarily if they should be scripture or not, but I will say that this is what the people believed during the Second Temple time. All the way back from when Zerubbabel, and Nehemiah and Ezra, they were building the new temple. With Cyrus said, "Here's some money, guys, go do it." And we at least know that some of these documents came out from then. There's speculation on some of the other ones, but we can at least get an understanding of what they believed happened back then. And it wasn't until some of these modern days that we come up with some of the more the histories that don't make quite as much sense. If you look at these things back then, they do make sense. If you go back to the ancient kings list, right? You mentioned that with Samaria. The reign lengths on that is anywhere from 10,000 to 400,000 years, right? So to me, how do you account for that? Could it been, when they're chiseling out doing the cuneiform, could they? Oh well, maybe they missed a couple, they're chiseling some things out. But it seems to me that these were times that were before the creation of Adam. Not all of them, but some of them were before the creation of Adam. And if you're going through and you're reading the book, you actually, when I'm talking about the Adim, some of the Adim, I'm actually using some of the names out of this king's list as some of the rulers of the Adim, because I wanted to tie that in with some of these things. And we're finding out more and more every day. I I use some of the sites like Göbekli Tepe. I use some of the sites like the pyramids at Giza, the pyramid in Bosnia. No one ever talks about that, right?
Wow.
But we have all these fascinating things all over the world. I mean, we have pyramids that are under the water, that are massive. What's going on with that? Why were these things built? And if we date them, again, they go way back. I mean, we keep finding more and more information that the history that we have been taught is not the history that we know. Just like there's been many things that I've seen in my walk in Christianity throughout the years that I first, I believed one way, but then I found out, hey man, I'm just kind of parroting what I was taught. I haven't really dug into this. I don't know if you guys can agree with that and know where I'm coming from. But I used to be a pretty staunch dispensationalist, pre-tribulation rapture guy. I was Hal Lindsey, growing up when I was 19. I could quote the late great Planet Earth and go through all the 3 points in a poem and tell you exactly how all that was going to happen. And I had passion behind it, but I didn't have a lot of really good spiritual knowledge. And I remember I was preaching in a tent revival years ago in Corsicana, Texas, guys. And I was getting ready to preach. I was going to teach that. I was a young guy, so I didn't get to do a lot of the evening ministry thing. So I was one of the guys that would teach during the day. And I was going to teach on the pre-tribulation rapture. And the Spirit of God spoke to me, not an audible voice, but he spoke to me and said, why are you going to teach on that? And I said, well, people need to know. And he said, well, where is that in the Word? And I had some verses, but it wasn't there. And he said, you put that on the shelf. Put it on the shelf until you start really digging in. And so I stopped right then. I was like, okay, God, and I think there's a lot of things like that we need to really evaluate and look at again. I remember, I pastored for 4 years in the city of Uncertain, Texas. That's a real place. And so when I was pastoring there, I questioned a lot of the stuff that we did. We just did them. Why do we do some of the things in the church the way we do them? I don't know. When you look at the scripture, there's no basis for them. And so I think that we should, some people get really freaked out by the word deconstruction, right? They're like, oh, that they think people are just leaving the faith. Some people do. And I think that's because they haven't had any foundation. But I think it's an okay thing for us to question things that we've been taught. Even the Bereans, when Paul, this mighty apostle, this guy that really knew the Torah forwards and backwards, when he went to the Bereans, they they took some notes. And then when they left, okay, we're going to check out to see if what this guy's saying is true. Instead of just taking it, well, pastor said this, this guy came, I saw this guy on YouTube. He said this, it's got to be true. So, I mean, it's just like, anything, you can listen to 3 different guys teach on the calendar, and each one of them makes great points. You're like, oh yeah, that's the one. Or then you listen to the next one. Oh yeah, that's the one. So I think we need to take a step back and really look at what the Word says with this whole creation event, because there's some big implications. All of a sudden, if you look at this from this perspective, all of a sudden mankind is not the focus, guys. How about that? Isn't that a wild thing? Mankind's not the focus. Who's the focus? It's Yeshua. It's Jesus, the Lamb slain from what? The foundation of the earth. So think about that. He was slain in the eyes of Yah, in the eyes of Jehovah, the eyes of God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? Well, we said a while ago, in the beginning, God created the heavens, the angels, and then the earth. Well, before he ever created the earth, Jesus was slain from the foundation. That was already there. That was a mystery.
Wow.
Think about that. These angels had witnessed something in the spirit realm that they had no clue about, right? How do we know that? Because if Satan had known that, he would never have crucified Yeshua. But still, there was something about it, even that testified back then to it. So I don't know. I just think it's exciting when we start putting some of these pieces together. We see that this counsel of God that we see, the late great Dr. Michael Heisner talked about in his books, and in Psalm 82 in different places. This counsel of God has been there for a while. This wasn't something brand new that God just like, hey, I think I'm going to create this council, this council of Elohim, right? No, this council has been there for a while. What were they doing before creation? What were they doing? What was their purpose at the inception? And again, we dig into all of these things in the book and show them in operation. I think it's fun. It's a fun place.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. When we when you discuss Gobekli Tepe,
Yeah,
a lot of their these statues they carved, very big, very heavy, anthropomorphic. They have no head. It just
Weird.
it's just the hands. And what's curious about the hands is they have 6 fingers.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you look at that, and these archaeologists and whatever, how can humanity be that so advanced back then? Well, because you're not looking at the Bible, you're not looking at
Right.
other stuff, alternative stuff that links all these things together. And when you look at this time, it might, I don't know, it's just conjecture, but it might have been the time of the day 6 people, because we know that Adam was an agrarian. He was there to tend the garden. And then we know that there was a creation, them, which is the day 6 people, and these people were hunter-gatherers.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam was created. It's right there in the Bible. Adam was created, and then later Eve was created. We don't know how much time passed between Adam and then Eve being created.
Sure.
But I went through a whole show with Gary Wayne on this, and we talked about the day 6 people. So these were obviously before Adam, and they might have been the people that Cain went to.
Sure.
When he was ostracized.
I lean more towards it, Don, because look, I don't think God is going to break his word, right? He says, look, you're not to marry your sister, right? You're not to marry your first cousin. And so where did Cain suddenly get this wife?
Yeah.
I don't think God's going to say, even by necessity, I'm going to allow it this one time. I think God would have done something different. I think God would have made a way. So I agree with what you're saying there. I think that's a very valid point. And I know there could be some issues here and there, but because some people say, well, how is Eve the mother of all living? Well, guess who made it through the flood? Only her offspring. Does that make sense? So I agree with that, brother. Yeah, it's a good point.
Someone had to build that city too, Enoch city.
There we go. Yeah.
And it wasn't just him,
And it's questions like these, that really caused me to want to dig into these subjects. Like with my first book that I wrote was the Nephilim. Look, when I first got into church, man, I was raised up a heathen. I was not raised up in church at all. And when I started reading about Joshua, and I'm reading that kill every man, woman, child, animal that's involved in the land of Canaan, I am freaking out. I'm like, whoa, pump the brakes. What is going on? Where's this God of love that he is saying genocide, kill everything? I'm like, what is going on? And it wasn't until I started really digging in and understanding the Nephilim and how they were hybrid creation, because I was taught the Sethite theory, guys. I was taught that the sons of God, the Bana Elohim, right, was the sons of Seth. How can that be? Because we still have righteous guys marrying horrible women, and that they don't produce giants, not to my knowledge. So, yeah. So it's questions like this that are healthy for us to ask and to dig into the scriptures, because I truly believe God has answers for us. Maybe not to the degree that we want, because there's a lot of stuff that we don't have a lot real deep information, but I think we can glean truths even from these other sources. But we always have to understand and look at them through the lens of the biblical narrative, and understand that some of the sources, like the Hindu Sanskrit and the different different histories that we see with the Greeks or the Romans, right? Or with different cultures, they all talk about kind of the same thing happening, but they look at them through a little bit of a different lens. And if we understand that they're getting their histories from the fallen ones, then we can understand. Okay, yeah, there will. No one's going to paint. No one wakes up and says, I'm going to be the bad guy. They all think that they're the good guy. You know, whoever's writing the story thinks they're the good guy. And so we see these fallen beings writing the story from like, hey, well, you know, mean old God was not one of these poor little humans to have knowledge. We're gonna help them out. We're gonna give them fire. We're gonna teach them how to do this stuff. That's okay, you know. And so that's their perspective, and God is kind of given a different perspective. And that's again another reason for the book is I wanted to be able to write this kind of history that is normally saved for like shows like Ancient Aliens or different narratives like this. I wanted to try to tell this kind of a story through a biblical lens without getting into evolution, without getting into Ancient Aliens, without getting into a lot of the secular versions of all this, and give people a really good understanding that this does make sense through a biblical narrative.
Yes.
Yeah, it does. When I look at the what science calls the caveman,
right?
Even though his bones are much stronger than ours, he had bigger brain capacity. It's something that draws caution to me. Like, how do they know these peoples were ignorant? They don't know. These could have, and the way they structure their faces like half ape is it's ridiculous.
I know, it's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, and for me, these might have been the day 6 people.
Maybe.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Because and when you get into Cain meeting with these people, and we know later when the sons of God came during the days of Jared, they made it with that race that Cain started, and and that's how we got the giants, and later create all kinds of abominations, satyrs, and
Sure.
and I know that the Book of Jasher is not canon, but it's got some good elements in there that make sense. Some of them are corrupted, but you can see which ones have meaning, have context.
Yeah. We could look at the Book of Giants that we found fragments of in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which date back to anywhere from 200 to 150 years BC. I mean, there's newer articles that are out there saying maybe these things are even older than that. So again, they're not scripture. They're coming from the Essenes. Maybe they had some corruption there too. We don't know, right? All the way. Could be just like some denominations we have today. It doesn't mean that everything the denomination has to say is bad. Maybe they just have some couple things that are rough. But the Book of Giants talks about that not only did the fallen angels corrupt mankind, but man, they were corrupting plants, insects, every kind of animal you could think of. And do we not see that in the histories? I think every culture has this mixed hybridization going on. We see, what was it that caused the Egyptians to look at some things like that? What was it that caused the Persians to show these cherubim? Like that wasn't a brand new idea to the Hebrews writing where Moses was writing the Old Testament with the Torah. I mean, these things were known already. Why did the fallen angels? Where did they come up with the idea for these different beings? Well, there's nothing new under the sun, guys. They saw these things in heaven. They saw the cherubim in heaven. If we look at Ezekiel, we look at what we see in Revelation. They've got these bodies with wings. They've got like 6 wings. They've got eyes all over them. They got different heads, different faces. Some look like a bull with the head of a man. I mean, all of these things. So where did the fallen angels get these ideas from? They got it because they saw copies of this stuff in heaven, and they were trying to duplicate it, but they were trying to do it not by God's power, not by His might, right, but by their own. And that's why they were corrupt. They were not made after their own kind. Mm-hmm. And these, it's interesting stuff. I wrote a book called The Priestly Garments: Who We Are in Messiah, and that's a straight teaching book. And when I get in it, I'm talking about the breastplate. It's got 12 stones on it. Well, there's another breastplate that's talked about in Isaiah, and that's the one that Enlil has, and it only has 9 stones. And there's actually an entire row. If you line them up, there's an entire row missing. And this row, each one of the stones has to do with a judgment or a decree that God has given us out of Genesis 49 per each one of the tribes. And if you go through and you look at the missing row that Enlil has, one of the things that he is missing that God gave a decree is that they were not able to recreate after their own kind. And I get into that in that book there, and that's a straight teaching book. But yeah, that's fascinating stuff. So we've all been given decrees or judgments. We say the word judgment, we kind of think a negative connotation, but God has given judgments, different things that He has commanded over mankind that we see in the priest's breastplate. So I think that's a fascinating thing to look at. And again, it helps us kind of get an idea that maybe God had all this planned out and figured out before He ever created anything. When you first open up in the book, Dom, I really tried to show God living outside of time. I don't know if you caught that in the preface or the preface of the book. I'm showing angels running in and out of heaven, coming up and down the mountain of God and the stones of fire. They're coming in and out of the presence of God. But God's throne. He is living outside of time. And I really tried to show that. I've got one angel running in because he's been assigned to Daniel, and he's trying to run to go get this answer for Daniel. He's passing Gabriel. Gabriel's muttering something about this word that he has to go give this lady named Mary. So it's just back and forth, and you're seeing God deal with all of these things all at the same time, because in eternity there is no time. It's very difficult for us to wrap our heads around that. But God declares Isaiah 46:10. God declares the end from the beginning. How? Because He lives outside of time. So I know it's just so many fascinating things I try to put into the book so we can try to get a little bit better idea of how these things work.
Yeah, that's a good visual. I haven't read the book, and I could envision what you're trying to emulate here, kind of like a big hub space. And in this hub space, time is all happening at once, correct? And then different missions from all different types of timelines. That's pretty cool. It's interesting.
Yeah. It's a fun ride, and I've had some great feedback from it from people that have read it, and they're like, man, I've never thought of it that way, but now it makes perfect sense. And it helps people understand, to me, and this is some of the purpose of the books, especially in the story narratives that I write, because some of these concepts that you may hear a minister on the podcast talk about, or you may hear somebody on TV preaching about. It's different when you're hearing a sermon than you're actually you're seeing it in a story format and how these things work together. And then all of a sudden it just clicks. Like in my Nephilim book, when the first wave of Nephilim begin to die off, the book of Enoch talks about that they're condemned as evil spirits, right? Well, what did that look like? It says they hungered. Enoch talks about that they hungered. They have an insatiable hunger. And so I try to explore that in that book and show how they begin to feed off of hate or lust or pride or envy and all these different things. And then they slowly begin to learn how to feed off of the men that are around them, And so, I had some guys that were that read the book, and they're like, Jeff, look, I've never thought of it like that, but the demons feeding off of my anger or feeding off of the lust that I'm looking at something I shouldn't look at, and they're feeding off of that, and you showed them with that they're biting into the guy's head, or they've got a talon in their neck or something like, or their shoulder, and man, they're like, I see that better now, and it helps me live better knowing that that's in the background. Again, I think like Dr. Michael Heisner tried to, in a theological format, present what was behind the veil. And then I try to do that in a story format that kind of brings it out for a little bit, for us, just to make it a little bit simpler.
Yeah, absolutely. The going back to the pyramids.
Yeah.
And this is my opinion.
Sure.
some of these statues or carvings are done out of rose granite, and that can only be done with a diamond cutter.
Yeah.
You can't use copper chisel. So when we got into Berosus and Mantheo, the they're pagans, right? Whatever, but very ancient texts, whatever was left. They talked about how these 7 sages are the ones that built these pyramids and that showed the people how to do these things. And guess who they are? The 7 sages. This goes way back. They're called the Shebtu and Shebeti in Egypt and the Middle East. And I'm just dumbfounded when I hear people talk about. You got people talk about megaliths. That's their thing. Who built them? Who did this? Look at all you got to do is start researching, and you'll find the answer. And that's Shebtu and Shebeti. They're the ones who built. But why did they build pyramids? What were they trying to mimic? We see in Revelation that this kingdom of God comes down and has four points of its foundation. So is it going to be a cube or is it going to be a pyramid? Yeah. And the mountain of God is like this.
I think it's a pyramid because we're trying to duplicate the mountain of God. Amen. That's good.
Yep. And I think it's going to be something that we can't even imagine. So maybe it's all gold and Go ahead.
We see these things all over the world. Now look, I live up in the northern panhandle of West Virginia, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away west of us. We find the Newark earthworks. Right? I don't know if you guys have ever done a show or looked into the Newark earthworks over there. It's actually one of the largest mound complexes in the United States. Huge. It's vast. I mean, it's massive. Right there on I-70. I'm sorry, 70. I think it's 77 or 70. Going toward there. There used to be I think it was a 200-foot tall stone pyramid. You guys ever heard about this?
Oh no!
Back in the mid 1800s, it was still there. The farmers took the stones to make the foundations of their houses. They took the stones to make the foundation of a big dam so they could make a lake. And underneath this massive stone pyramid was a big earthen mound surrounded by 12 smaller mounds. Under the big mound, they found a wooden coffin with a giant skeleton. And under the coffin, they found a little carved box that had an effigy-looking thing. Like it was it said Moshe. It was written in Paleo Hebrew. It's got Moshe. It's got the 10 Commandments all written on it. They found this back in the 1800s, and they're like, when they first found it, they were super excited because they didn't know it was Paleo Hebrew, and they're like, oh, this is from the Adena. This must have been the language of the Adena, and they dated it to like 650 BC. Everybody was cool with it until they figured out it was Paleo Hebrew, and then they're like, oh, this has got to be a fake because it doesn't fit any of our narratives. So if you want to look those up, it's the Newark Holy Stones. We did a show on that on the Way Remnant. We called it Biblical Umparts, right? The out of place artifacts. And it's a pretty fascinating show we did on that. But we try to tie some of these things in because there's these technologies now, like you're talking about. You can go to Machu Picchu, you can go to all these places and see these rock formations that there's no way. It almost looks like they were liquefied and poured together, but they're not concrete. Other parts that look like they were dug out with such precision that out of the granite that we have trouble duplicating that today, much less, like you say, digging it out with copper tools. There's no way, man. There's no way. One of the places here in North America was so large in the Ohio and Indiana area. It was so large that it would have taken multiple decades to build some of these things that went on that we have actually destroyed. Again, we used to have a 200-foot stone pyramid, but we took it down. We destroyed it. I don't think it was done necessarily maliciously, to obfuscate or hide something. Maybe it was. But at the same time, we've destroyed a lot of these things and ignored these parts of our history. So yeah, that again, we have so much history that does not seem to fit with our modern understanding of the biblical narrative. So maybe we need to re-examine our biblical narrative. And again, this is not some kind of crazy theology that Jeff Brennan came up with. There's some really good scholarship. There's very good Hebrew and grammatical linguistics that goes behind it all throughout the scripture. And it answers a lot of these questions that helps tie things together. So I think that's and it's important for us to be able to do that, because we have with the invention of the internet and things, guys, information's flowing freely, and you can't hide behind bad doctrine, because people will ferret it out nowadays, and you've got to be able to look and give a defense. Peter and Paul talk about us being able to give a good defense of our faith, and I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. We know, I guess we can conjecture that Joshua probably was born maybe 1600 something BC.
Yeah, something like that.
And when himself and Caleb and Moses started routing the giants, we know a lot of those giants fled, because there was a stele found in North Africa, and it says, "We are they who basically they ran from the robber Joshua the son of Nun." So these were the Phoenicians, Amorites. So these hybrid giants fled, and obviously they probably spoke Hebrew.
Sure.
And they brought all those artifacts back to the United States, like you were talking about, and also in the caves of a cave in Arizona, where they suspect that and you also have the caves in the Colorado River, where they found like Egyptian type of giant mummies or something, just like different mixture of like Oriental and like Middle Eastern. It was just like really weird find, but that guy Kincaid found all this stuff, and then everything just kind of like, whatever he found, they probably buried it or took it all the way to the Smithsonian. So why does the government want to worldwide just hide these things? Because for me, if it's proof that for people who are still on the side, like, oh, there are no giants, you're crazy, it's all whatever. But if they came and said, oh yeah, we found these giants, and here are all the metal armor they wore, and the necklaces and the swords and whatever, they were real. Well, that makes the Bible real. And you got too much pushback. Yeah, you get too much pushback from the atheists and the Satanists and the agnostics and whatever. And for people that research this stuff, I mean, the giants were real, and there might still be giants now that are in stasis, according to Jonathan Dover, the Navajo Ranger. And there could be because we know in the Bible, I forget what you might know this. I don't know if it's Isaiah or it's something 13 or something. It says in the Berean that these giants are going to awaken, and God's going to use them to pour out His wrath.
Amen. And Yeshua, Yeshua talks about the men's hearts failing them for fear for what is coming up on the earth. It's a very unfortunate English translation, but it's up on or up out of the earth. And you mentioned the Amorites. I love that. This site in Newark. It's miles, and it's hill country. It's miles and miles wide with how big this place is.
Right.
Listen, they didn't have any transits. They didn't have any way to line these things up, and especially over miles and miles away. They didn't even have a written language at the time, right? The Adena, right? They didn't have a written language. But this one place in Newark, it tracks 18 different movements and positions of the moon. A mathematician from Ohio State University came out there and looked at this and said, look, guys, we don't even possess today the trigonometry needed to develop this the way they did. Now think about that. And so I had Fritz Zimmerman come on our program, and Fritz did some research with this, and his conclusion was, with the artifacts that have been found, and the way that these places were built, it's from an Amorite origin. So yeah, I think that when Joshua was going in the promised land, and I go through this really cool in the Nephilim book, because I show it not only from the story from the Israelites when they're crossing over, I flip it around and I show from the Nephilim. They're watching from the banks in the hill country, looking over the Jordan, and they're seeing these tiny little people come over with this golden box. They step foot in the river backs up, stands up on the end all the way to the city of Adam, and they're freaking out. And then they go make preparations, and they're like, oh, we'll handle this. And then after Jericho falls, and then after Ai falls, I believe that dispersion happens, and they're like, man, we got to get some of our guys out of here. We're fixed to be annihilated. And I think that they did. I think that they went to the uttermost parts of the earth during that. Yeah, so interesting things that we talk about. Another interesting thing that I postulate in the Nephilim book is at the Tower of Babel, where we have Nimrod building the Tower of Babel, and we see God confusing the languages. It's interesting if you look at the Hebrew and you look at the English in that, it's almost as if when this happens, the confusion of the languages, we also see a dispersion of mankind across the earth. Now, listen, science backs this up, because if we look back at the there are some parts that spread out. Now, don't conflate what I'm saying. But all of a sudden, we see at the time of Babel, we also see civilizations just boom, 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 popping up all over the place, and developed civilization with language. How did they get this? We don't even see some of them forming. We just see them pop up. And so it's almost like the same thing where God translated Philip when he was baptizing the eunuch, and he translated him to a city 20 miles away. Why couldn't have God done the same thing at Babel to create not only confusion, but to split up this people that were in one accord? So interesting stuff. But I challenge you to go back in Genesis and read that again. I put that in the book in a story format, but it's something to kind of sink your teeth into. Again, I love going through. That's the reason I wrote these two books. And again, like after I finished writing the Nephilim book, 11 years later, I'm just chomping at the bit trying to. I wanted to get a prequel out. Well, what? Because I had a lot of people say, "Well, Jeff, what happened with this thing before Adam? What happened then? What is all that?" And so that's again, it's not scripture, guys, but it is trying to get you to open up and look and really examine. With the before Adam, I have a lot of footnotes in there, so scriptural references, so you can kind of see where I'm making some tie-ins and things like that. But it's good for us to look at these things and try to get a better understanding of what really happened. Because you guys know, listen, I grew up in public school. I was taught that Christopher Columbus was the first guy that discovered America. I don't think that's the case now, right? So maybe some of the things that we've been taught that were absolutely stone cold fact, maybe they're not exactly what we've been taught, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Columbus wasn't here first. They were the natives who were here first. The native Indians called this country here Turtle Island. This is way back a long time ago. And before them, there was another species that was there that the Indians say we didn't build the mounds. They did. Yeah. And then because today there's so much racism going on. There's so much, they were here first. This race was here first. That, you know what? You guys got it all wrong, man. First of all, this is God's land, the whole earth. And if it was the giants that were here first, or the Atlanteans, there was a war. I read somewhere. It was a ethnographer. His name flees me. But he talks about, 20 acres of bones found everywhere with the skeletal, the facial structure was like really pointed, eloquent, like a race with like blonde hair, and then another race that was just like, maybe it was the mound builders. I mean, who knows what happened back there, but something happened. But when you talk about men's hearts will fail for what's coming upon the earth, I think that includes the giants. I think that includes. There's this. Unfortunately, there's this fascination to idolize Bigfoot now, or Dogman, or
you see this thing. No, you don't.
Yeah, it's just For me. I don't know why. It just bothers me to see people out there sporting a shirt with Bigfoot on their chest and wearing cool sunglasses, real cute and funny, or a dog man or an alien, cartoonish. You know what? People out there, these are probably the monsters that are probably going to join the giants when the Bible talks about things coming upon the earth. And these are not God's creation, because when I interviewed someone like Jonathan Dover, and he says the natives say they see these shadow demons come up from the ground and they form solid into Bigfoot, and there's footprints. And Jonathan Dover, he tracks them for miles and miles and miles, and guess what? They disappear again. That is not a creation of God. That's a Nephilim hybrid.
Yeah,
and people, I'm seeing more and more of this happening with especially Christian podcasts. Their moniker is Six Fingers or an all-seeing eye, or there's nothing Christian about that, man.
Yeah, why are we promoting the kingdom of darkness? We again, I wrote books on this, but our main focus at the Way Remnant is discipleship, is trying to teach people about the fallen. Israel knew God's acts, but Moses knew his ways. We're trying to get people to learn the way. Yeshua said, "I'm the way, the truth, the life." What is that way? So we're trying to teach people and disciple people how to walk that way, and that's we do talk about a little bit of the fringe stuff every once in a while, because Yeshua talked about the fringe stuff. Peter talked about the fringe stuff. Jude talks of, my goodness, you read the book of Jude. Wow, he's talking about all kinds of fringe, but it shouldn't be our main focus. We can talk about those things. I would challenge our listeners tonight. The book of Hebrews in chapter 6, verses 1 and 2 talks about us leaving the elementary doctrines of Messiah. Would you be able to take the next 7 doctrines that's talked about in Hebrews chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, take those 7 doctrines that are in there, and would you be able to go right now and teach a class, an elementary class to new believers on repentance of dead works, on faith towards God, on baptism? I get it all, but I'm just saying most Christians would not be able to go and teach or disciple someone on these doctrines, because most people don't know anything about them. Again, and then we have people today, that's all they want to focus on is the Nephilim. I think it's important for us to look at that part of history, because I do believe it's been obfuscated. I do believe it's been hidden from us. The world system doesn't want us to really be able to see that these things happened, because they don't want us to look at it from a biblical narrative. They would rather us focus on, it's an alien, or it's the Anunnaki, or it's this other thing. No, look, it's these fallen watcher angels that produce this hybrid, these hybrid beings. You had the Amalekites, that means long necks, right? You had the Zamzuni, you had the Eminim, right? And these were like night terrors. You had the Hittites were like the troglodytes. You had all these different things. The names mean something, and we still see some of these things today. So we're the Zamzumi. We're these what we would call today a skinwalker, right? I don't know. So it's interesting to look at these things and really dive into them, because every population, I even hate using the word race. There's only one race. We're all human, right? So, but every nation, all right, around the earth have these stories, have these histories. Now, whether it's from a biblical worldview or whether it's from the fallen world, the view from the fallen angels, that that you need to kind of keep that in mind. But they all have the same stories. I don't know if you guys have ever had Chief Joseph Riverwind on, but he has a great book, What the Old Ones Say, I think is the name of the book. And he talks about how he goes through and he's visited with all the chiefs of the American Indians and writing down some of their oral traditions that just aren't there. And they talk about that they had prophecies and visions of someone over the great river, over the great sea, dying and becoming, for mankind. They had a vision of all different things. The Cherokee, the actual name of the Cherokee nation actually gets into, it's called People of the Fringe, talking about Tzitzit, right? Tzitziot. So, I mean, there's all kinds of interesting things that go on that we don't really understand. because we don't dig into these histories. Dom, I love your passion for history. I can tell, man, you were studied up on it. And how sad is that you are an anomaly, right? Probably people that are watching your audience, that watch your program, they're probably an anomaly that really want to dig in and find out what happened with these stories, and what happened. Where is the truth? How did Enlil fall? What, if he was created in perfect wisdom and perfect beauty, how did he get to this place where he said, I'm going to ascend before heaven? I'm going to, all these things. I'm going to be God. How did he get to this place? And what happened? What was the judgment that happened afterwards? That, like I say, that we read in Jeremiah, that we see the whole earth is just clobbered. And we see that the Spirit of God in Genesis 1:2 is hovering over, it says, the face of the deep. All of us think that everything, the lights were out everywhere. That's not what it says. He does say, let there be light. Where was the light? He said that the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the deep, and the darkness was upon the face of the deep, right? The face of the deep, that's that abuso, that's that tahim, right? That's that prison that these angels fell, and they were locked up for a time. How do we know they were locked up for a time? Because they were loosed again. They did this. God did the same thing in Enoch. He said, look, you guys screwed up. I'm going to lock you up for 70 generations. If you add those things up, they were released again around the early 1900s. What happened in the early 1900s? We had a massive intellectual explosion. We went from horse and buggy for centuries and centuries to all of a sudden we got rockets, we got airplanes, we've got the computer, we've got all this stuff going on. Nikola Tesla's talking about he's hearing from his these spiritual beings, right? These were listen, this was the Watchers again. The Watchers were communicating to people that were open. I'm not saying Nikola Tesla was a bad guy. He was getting his information from fallen angels. Same thing, guys, back in the days of Jared. Same thing, in my opinion, back when Enlil, before he fell, and they were doing stuff on the earth that we see, like with Gobekli Tepe and different things like this all over the earth. So I think it's a fascinating tie-in when we start seeing and it goes to show God's judgment and his mercy. Because if you look at it from this viewpoint, guys, you see that God gave Enlil, Lucifer, Satan, whatever you want to call him. I don't care if you agree with me on Enlil or not. That's not a big deal. Hillel ben Shachar, right? Whatever you want to call him, right? He gave him chances. He because God is just. And why is he keeping him around? Because he's wanting to demonstrate his justice and his mercy. What do we see in the end times? We see, when Yeshua comes back on the scene, we see the millennial reign. We see, God locking, giving him the boot into the abyss for 1,000 years. And then towards the end, he brings him back out. Why? Because he's still wanting to show his justice and his mercy. The scripture says his mercy endures forever. Great is thy faithfulness. His faithfulness is better than life. Anyway, I just love those types of things that we're looking at tonight. I don't know. I think, this before Adam, it's not your typical Genesis story, right? Because it's not the narrative that we've all been taught. But I do believe it's a narrative that ties in scripture a lot better. It ties in history a lot better. It helps us to understand, well, why was there a fallen serpent already in the Garden of Eden? Did he just get created and all of a sudden he fell? It doesn't make any sense, guys. Something's going on. There had to be some time. So, is there a history that's older than what we've been told? Absolutely. And again, we're able to look at it through a biblical narrative. So I think that's, I think that's important.
Absolutely. It's good to research, and people out there, don't take my word for, what I'm discussing tonight. Look into the Bible, look into what Jeff's talking about, and read it for yourself. And if you want to know more about the Sumerians, the 7 sages, we got, I don't know if the series is up yet on YouTube, but I did I think it was 2 or 3 part series on the 7 sages, and they can listen to that if they want to learn. And a lot of stuff is ancient records, but we could only put pieces together on what the ancients said about this times, the pyramids and and the gods and so forth. And you know, to rehash, you know, we know that the earth was created to be inhabited, but there was a rebellion. It had to be a rebellion because that whole world just was destroyed. And I think these angels, and just conjecture, it's not canon or that, so don't crucify me for that. But when my belief is, when the angels leave the first state, they become human. That's it. You know, human and angel, whatever. And I don't think they can go back to that full form, back to the kingdom once they decide to leave. Who knows what happened back there? But we know that first world age was destroyed. And this is the time before Adam. Then you had the day 6 people. Then right when Adam was created, then Eve, and then you got into Cain and the city of Nod and all this stuff, and who was there and who did he marry, and I think we pretty much nailed it on what happened in the pre-Adamic. But I would encourage people to get your book to know more about it, go more in depth about it. We're just scratching the surface here on what happened or what could have happened. But any closing comments that you have or anything you want to say, Jeff?
Oh, well, I appreciate you guys having me on.
Thank you
guys. If your audience wants to find out more about our ministry, they can go to The Way Remnant. Just look it up on YouTube. You can find my books on thewayremnant.com/books. And you can find, there'll be links there. You can go get Before Adam. Guys, I would encourage you, go check that book out. It's a nice big thick book.
it looks cool
that
too.
one book, guys, listen, it's a big thick book. It's a lot of information. And it's a really good solid teaching, but it's done in a story format. And I've heard from a lot of people, they're like, man, this makes so much better sense when you read it as a story. And is everything in there canon? Is everything inspired? No. There are some literary licenses that I took, but it's a good springboard for you guys to go and check out and open up to maybe a little bit different version of history than we've all been taught. So yeah, I would encourage you guys, revisit, go check out my books, but revisit Genesis with fresh eyes, right? Investigate the evidence that's like been buried beneath time, discover the name of this fallen angel. It's not Lucifer, but it's Enlil. Why is Lucifer or Satan? Why don't we see him mentioned in any of the pantheons or in any of the ancient writings? It's because the name has been hidden from us from a bad translation that Jerome did off the Latin Vulgate. His name is Enlil, and if you understand that his name is Enlil, he is all over the place in history. So anyway, that's some good stuff, guys. Go check out my book, Before Adam. Check it out. And guys, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, sir. God bless everybody. We are signing out. Hold on, let me see.
Finally, I feel alive, and I know why. Cause I'm giving all the glory to the Most High. They don't want to hear the truth, that is no lie. If we ain't in the last days, then we're close by. The devil's trying to snatch your soul, and it's not a game. You hear me saying Jesus Christ, and it's not in vain. They might get offended every time I drop his name, but I'ma let them know that I'm not ashamed. That's right, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Even if I know it'll be making them hostile. Thinking about the persecution of apostles. They want to see his people in the dirt with the fossils. You may be thinking that might sound extreme, but you gotta ask yourself, is this life what it seems? People suffering for Christ in this world full of schemes and agendas. Would you give your life for the king? Give it up. Martyrdom, yeah, that really is a thing. Better look it up if you don't believe, you know what I mean? We gotta try our hardest not to be so naive and be mindful of the children and people that bleed for the name of Christ. The only one that can save your life. He saved mine never once, gotta thank him twice. The amount of 1,000 thanks in a day, knowing I gotta give him more praise when I pray. Finally I feel alive, and I know why. Cause I'm giving all the glory to the Most High. They don't wanna hear the truth, that is no lie. If we ain't in the last days, then we're close by. The devil's trying to snatch your soul, and it's not a game. You hear me saying Jesus Christ, and it's not in vain. They might get offended every time I drop his name, but I'ma let them know that I'm not ashamed. Can't be content with just church on Sunday, or just going through the motions, cause one day I'ma have to give account for my time spent and where my empty words and all of that pride went. Calamity bringing clarity. Seems like a good church these days is a rarity. 1 out of 7 in the book of Revelation. A perverse generation on the verge of devastation. A sign of the times, realizing that I'm in danger if I don't put my mind to the grind and do a work for the Lord. Every verse is a sword. Overseas there is people getting murked for the Lord. Imagining the whole church in the court, death itself shortly after rebirth in the Lord. Rapping for Christ like I wanna be his hype man, and I know opportunities have a lifespan. Finally I feel alive and I know why, cause I'm giving all the glory to the Most High. They don't wanna hear the truth, that is no lie. If we ain't in the last days, then we're close by. The devil's trying to snatch your soul and it's not a game. You hear me saying Jesus Christ and it's not in vain. They might get offended every time I drop his name, but I'ma let them know that I'm not ashamed.
The idea is trusting in God even when it doesn't make sense. In 2 Timothy 1 verse 12, this is why I am suffering as I am, yet I am not ashamed, because I know whom I have believed. I am convinced that he is able to guard what I have entrusted to him for that day. I am not ashamed, he says. I'm not ashamed to trust God with my life.